The year is 1577, and in the shadowy chambers of Richmond Palace, Queen Elizabeth I makes a decision that will reshape the entire world. She leans forward, her eyes glinting with calculated ambition, and whispers instructions to a weathered sea captain named Francis Drake. The mission is simple yet treasonous by international law: sail to the other side of the world, plunder Spanish colonial treasures, and return with enough gold to bankrupt England's greatest enemy. What neither of them knows is that this single voyage will not merely fill England's coffers, but will ignite the birth of the most powerful empire the world has ever seen. Francis Drake was not born into nobility or privilege. He emerged from the rough coastal town of Tavistock in Devon, the eldest son of a Protestant farmer-turned-preacher who fled religious persecution. Young Francis learned to sail on the treacherous Thames estuary, where icy waters and unpredictable currents separated competent sailors from corpses. By his teenage years, Drake had already mastered navigation, seamanship, and something far more valuable: an unshakable determination to rise above his common birth. He apprenticed on merchant vessels trading along the English coast, but his true education came later, in the blood-warm waters of the Caribbean, where he learned that Spanish colonial ships carried more wealth than most European kingdoms possessed. Drake witnessed firsthand the brutal Spanish monopoly over New World riches, their galleons groaning under the weight of Peruvian silver and Mexican gold, protected by the assumption that no foreign power would dare challenge Spain's maritime dominance. That assumption was about to be catastrophically wrong. By the 1570s, Drake had already earned a fearsome reputation as a privateer, a legal pirate sanctioned by the English crown to attack enemy vessels. His raids on Spanish ports in Panama had brought him considerable wealth and the attention of Queen Elizabeth herself. The Queen faced an impossible dilemma. England was a relatively poor nation compared to Spain, which had grown obscenely wealthy from its American colonies. Spain's King Philip II commanded the largest navy in the world, fielded armies that dominated European battlefields, and possessed enough gold to buy the loyalty of half the continent. England needed a strategic masterstroke, something audacious enough to level the playing field without triggering open warfare. Elizabeth found her answer in Francis Drake, a man whose ambition matched her own and whose nautical genius could accomplish what seemed impossible. She secretly invested in his expedition, providing ships, provisions, and royal backing while maintaining plausible deniability should the mission fail or provoke Spanish retaliation. On December 13, 1577, Drake's fleet of 5 ships slipped quietly out of Plymouth Harbor under the cover of an English winter's darkness. The flagship was the Pelican, later renamed the Golden Hinde, a galleon that would become legendary. Officially, the expedition's purpose was to explore potential trade routes in the southern Pacific Ocean. Unofficially, every man aboard knew they were embarking on the most dangerous treasure hunt in history. Drake commanded approximately 160 men, a mixture of experienced sailors, eager adventurers, and hardened fighters. They understood the risks: Spanish warships, hostile indigenous peoples, uncharted waters, diseases like scurvy and dysentery, violent storms, and the ever-present possibility of mutiny or starvation. Yet they also understood the potential rewards: shares of Spanish gold that could transform poor English sailors into wealthy gentlemen. The journey south along the Atlantic coast of Africa proved relatively uneventful, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Drake's co-commander, Thomas Doughty, a gentleman soldier appointed by court investors, began questioning Drake's authority and spreading dissent among the crew. This represented more than a simple personality clash. It embodied the class warfare that defined Elizabethan England. Doughty represented the entitled aristocracy who believed leadership was their birthright, while Drake symbolized meritocracy, the dangerous idea that competence mattered more than noble blood. When the fleet reached the coast of Argentina, Drake made a decision that would cement his absolute authority and reveal his ruthless pragmatism. He accused Doughty of mutiny and treason, conducted a hasty trial, and ordered his execution by beheading. Before Doughty's death, Drake reportedly shared communion with him, and they dined together as gentlemen, a chillingly civilized prelude to judicial murder. The message to the crew was unmistakable: Drake would tolerate no challenge to his command, regardless of social rank or personal friendship. In August 1578, Drake's fleet approached the Strait of Magellan, the legendary passage between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans at the southern tip of South America. Ferdinand Magellan had been the first European to navigate this treacherous waterway nearly 60 years earlier, and his voyage had ended with his death in the Philippines and only 18 survivors from an original crew of 270. The strait represented one of the most dangerous sailing routes on Earth: 310 miles of narrow channels surrounded by towering cliffs, swept by hurricane-force winds, plagued by unpredictable currents and subject to sudden violent storms that could dash ships against rocks without warning. Drake spent 16 days navigating this maritime nightmare, his ships battered by winds so powerful they shredded sails and snapped masts like kindling. By the time the fleet emerged into the Pacific Ocean, only 3 ships remained seaworthy, and Drake's patience was exhausted. He made the calculated decision to send one ship back to England and scuttled another, consolidating his surviving crew aboard the Golden Hinde. This transformed the expedition from a fleet into a lone predator, faster, more maneuverable, and absolutely committed to the mission's success. What happened next changed everything. As Drake sailed north along the Pacific coast of South America, he discovered something that made his pulse quicken with predatory excitement. The Spanish colonial ports were completely undefended on the Pacific side. Spain had concentrated all its naval defenses on the Atlantic and Caribbean approaches, never imagining that any enemy would survive the journey through the Strait of Magellan. Drake found Spanish ships anchored peacefully in harbors, their hatches open, their crews unarmed and unsuspecting. It was like discovering a dragon's treasure hoard guarded only by sleeping shepherds. Drake attacked with systematic efficiency, capturing Spanish vessels one after another, relieving them of silver bars, gold coins, precious gems, and navigational charts that revealed the locations of even more treasure. The Spanish called Drake El Drake, the dragon, and their terror was justified. In Callao, Peru's main port, Drake captured a ship with 1,500 bars of silver. Near the coast of Ecuador, he captured the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, nicknamed Cacafuego by the Spanish, a treasure ship carrying 26 tons of silver, 80 pounds of gold, 13 chests of silver coins, and countless emeralds and pearls. This single capture represented more wealth than the annual revenue of the English crown. Drake's treatment of captured Spanish sailors revealed both his strategic brilliance and his pragmatic mercy. He rarely killed his prisoners, instead treating them with surprising courtesy, confiscating their weapons and valuables, but leaving them with enough supplies to reach shore safely. This calculated kindness served multiple purposes. It prevented the needless loss of life that might provoke Spain into declaring total war. It generated stories among Spanish sailors that El Drake was a gentleman pirate rather than a bloodthirsty monster. And it ensured that captured crews spread tales of English naval superiority throughout the Spanish colonial empire. Drake understood that psychological warfare was as valuable as actual combat, and that fear of English pirates would make future Spanish ships more cautious, more expensive to defend, and less profitable to operate. By mid-1579, Drake had accumulated so much treasure that the Golden Hinde sat dangerously low in the water, heavy with wealth. He faced a critical decision: return through the Strait of Magellan and risk encountering Spanish warships that would surely be hunting him by now, or attempt something that had been accomplished only once before: continue west and circumnavigate the entire globe. Drake chose the audacious option. He sailed further up the North American coast, possibly reaching as far as present-day Oregon or even Vancouver Island, searching for the legendary Northwest Passage that might provide a shortcut back to England. When that search proved fruitless, he stopped at a location he named Nova Albion, likely somewhere near modern San Francisco, where he claimed the territory for Queen Elizabeth and careened his ship for repairs. Local indigenous peoples, possibly Coast Miwok tribes, were fascinated by these strange visitors with pale skin and mysterious technology. Drake's crew recorded detailed observations of these encounters, documents that would later fuel English claims to North American territories. The journey across the Pacific proved almost as deadly as the Strait of Magellan, but in different ways. For 68 days, the Golden Hinde sailed westward without sighting land, crossing the largest ocean on Earth with Renaissance-era navigation tools, dead reckoning, celestial observations with primitive instruments, and Drake's own extraordinary instinct for seamanship. The crew suffered from scurvy, their gums bleeding, teeth loosening, old wounds reopening. Water supplies grew brackish and fetid. Food stores developed weevils and mold. Men began dying, their bodies committed to the Pacific depths, with prayers that grew more desperate as the weeks stretched on. When they finally sighted the Philippines, it felt like salvation granted by divine intervention. Drake navigated through the Indonesian archipelago, establishing trading relationships with local sultanates and carefully mapping sea routes that would prove invaluable for future English expeditions. In the Moluccas, the fabled Spice Islands, Drake loaded 6 tons of valuable cloves, adding to his already extraordinary cargo. The final leg of the journey around the Cape of Good Hope and up the African coast tested the crew's endurance one last time. The Golden Hinde was barely seaworthy, her hull encrusted with barnacles, her rigging held together by makeshift repairs, her remaining crew exhausted and malnourished. On September 26, 1580, nearly 3 years after departing England, Francis Drake sailed into Plymouth Harbor with his ship riding low in the water, heavy with the greatest treasure haul in English history. The news spread across England like wildfire. Drake had returned, he had circumnavigated the globe, he had humiliated Spain, and he had brought back enough wealth to pay off England's entire national debt, and still have enough left over to finance future voyages. The political implications were staggering. Spain demanded Drake's execution as a pirate and the return of stolen property. King Philip II was apoplectic with rage, realizing that England had effectively declared economic war against his empire. Queen Elizabeth faced enormous diplomatic pressure to disavow Drake's actions and maintain peaceful relations with Spain. Instead, in April 1581, she traveled personally to Deptford to board the Golden Hinde, where she knighted Francis Drake, transforming him from a common sailor into Sir Francis Drake, gentleman. This single ceremony represented England's official embrace of aggressive maritime expansion, colonial ambition, and the willingness to challenge Spanish dominance through a combination of trade, exploration, and state-sanctioned piracy. Drake's circumnavigation demonstrated that Spanish power was vulnerable, that English ships could sail anywhere in the world, and that enormous wealth awaited any nation bold enough to seize it. The treasure Drake brought back, estimated at the equivalent of billions of dollars today, provided the capital investment that launched England's transformation into a global maritime power. This wealth funded the expansion of England's navy, financed trading expeditions to Asia and the Americas, and bankrolled the development of advanced shipbuilding techniques that would give England naval superiority for the next 3 centuries. Drake's detailed navigational charts and geographical discoveries opened previously unknown trade routes and revealed the true extent of Spanish colonial holdings, information that proved invaluable for future English expeditions. His demonstration that a relatively small, well-commanded fleet could devastate Spanish colonial shipping fundamentally altered European geopolitical calculations and encouraged other nations to challenge Spanish hegemony. Yet Drake's legacy remains profoundly complicated and morally ambiguous. To the English, he was a national hero, a brilliant naval commander, and a patriot who served his queen and country with courage and genius. To the Spanish and many indigenous peoples of the Americas, he was a pirate, a thief, and a harbinger of colonial exploitation that would devastate their societies for centuries. The wealth he captured had been extracted through the brutal Spanish colonial system that enslaved and killed millions of indigenous Americans. Drake himself participated in the slave trade earlier in his career, though he later released enslaved Africans from captured Spanish ships. His raids disrupted Spanish colonial administration, but they also contributed to an escalating cycle of European imperialism, violence, and exploitation that would define the next 4 centuries of global history. Francis Drake died in 1596 off the coast of Panama, still fighting Spanish ships, still seeking glory and gold. He was buried at sea in a lead coffin, his body committed to the Caribbean waters where he had first made his fortune. But his true legacy transcends his personal story. Drake's circumnavigation voyage demonstrated that global maritime dominance was achievable, that enormous wealth could be extracted from overseas territories, and that naval power could project national influence across unprecedented distances. These lessons became the foundational principles of the British Empire, which would eventually control nearly a quarter of the world's land surface and population. Every subsequent English expedition to the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific followed routes that Drake pioneered. The East India Company, the colonization of North America, the naval supremacy that defeated Napoleon, and the Victorian Empire upon which the sun never set. All of these developments trace their origins to that moment in 1577, when a common-born sailor received secret instructions from his queen and set sail to challenge the greatest empire on earth. The Golden Hinde itself became a symbol of English ambition, preserved as a national treasure until it eventually deteriorated beyond repair. But the spirit of Drake's voyage, that combination of strategic daring, technological innovation, calculated risk-taking, and absolute determination to transform England's global position, became embedded in English and later British national identity. Today, we recognize that the empire Drake helped create brought both tremendous advancement and immeasurable suffering, that his achievements were built partly on exploitation and violence, and that his legacy must be understood in all its complexity. Yet there is no denying the historical significance of that single 3-year voyage, when one man and one ship demonstrated that the world was smaller than anyone imagined, that no empire's dominance was permanent, and that the course of history could be changed by audacity, skill, and the willingness to sail into the unknown. Sir Francis Drake's lost voyage was never truly lost. It became the foundation upon which modern global civilization was built, for better and for worse.